In the 100-plus years of the reference desk, its role in the library has not changed greatly. As outlined by Samuel Green in 1876, the four functions of the reference service are to teach users how to use the library and its resources, answer specific informational queries from users, recommend sources to users that fit their needs or desires, and promote the library within the community. As academic libraries continue to face budget cuts, or their budgets remain the same, it is important to continually assess the effectiveness of all services provided. In the context of the library public services, this assessment will determine the physical presence of librarians, modes of communication, and how to staff access points. Three current and emerging models that have developed from this recent assessment are tiered reference, virtual reference, and roaming reference. Each of these models attempts to address concerns of effectively reaching their users through innovative communication while attempting to reorganize the reference interview experience to match user needs with levels of expertise most efficiently. The present models of reference services developed out of the successes and failures of the previous model, the subject specialist librarian. As the reference desk developed from a single figure to an entire department, librarians began to specialize based on their subject of knowledge in order to provide the most expert services to users. A benefit of this specialization was that a researcher could work closely with a librarian and their subject of interest and receive high-quality service. While the subject librarian's expertise was a great advantage to researchers, it also led to increasingly specialized focus that was no longer suited to the general reference environment. Highly specialized librarians frequently burnt out on answering the often repetitive and mundane questions that came to the reference desk. Examples of such questions may be included directional inquiries or simple title searches. This not only frustrated librarians, but was a waste of the library budget to pay well-trained professionals to answer questions that could be handled by students or other paraprofessional staff. An innovation of the subject specialist librarian was the tiered reference model, also called the Brandeis model because of where it originated. Under the tiered model, there are 2 points of service. The first tier is staffed by students and paraprofessionals who will be the first point of contact for patrons. The first tier answers simple questions and fields more advanced questions for librarians. The second tier consists of librarians who will have patrons referred to them by the first tier. Under the tiered reference model, librarians have more time to work on other duties and will only work with patrons on advanced research concerns. Kansas University libraries recently implemented the tiered model to address budget and staffing concerns. After a year of using the tiered reference approach, their findings revealed that the presence of librarians was missed by students and faculty. Further complications involved users accepting whatever assistance was provided at the first tier while failing to follow through to the second tier when needed, and users who have experience working with specific librarians and choosing to skip the first tier and go straight to the second. While the tiered model was not an overall success, Kansas University found that the students and paraprofessionals trained to assist at the first level were an excellent resource and enjoyed the additional training. Following their experiment with the tiered reference system, Kansas University libraries returned students to other public services points like circulation, and the reference desk developed into an information desk that combined reference, IT, and what they called student success services. Paraprofessionals continued to assist librarians in uncomplicated reference interactions, and the addition of other services in the reference space freed librarians from receiving questions unrelated to research. Virtual reference is a model that includes asynchronous and synchronous modes of virtual communication between users and librarians. Examples of virtual reference tools include email, chat, instant messaging, and text messaging. The benefits of virtual reference services for users include speed, efficiency, and immediacy of questions answered while preserving anonymity in the reference interview. For librarians, virtual reference frees them from the physical space of the reference desk and allows for multiple librarians to observe the virtual platforms and therefore spreading out reference queries over many people at any given time. The method for evaluating the success of virtual reference service has focused on chat transcript analysis, placement of the service icon or widget on the library website, and the evolution of virtual services since their beginnings in the early 2000s. A case study of the 2011-2012 academic year at Washington State University tracks a complete overhaul of their virtual reference services. Washington State University libraries compared their user considerations of perceived convenience of service, users' technological experience, and type of information sought with their librarians' apprehensions of increased workload and the risk-taking and time commitment required when learning new skills. Washington State University implemented an intensive training program over the summer before their fall 2011 semester to switch reference librarians over to their new virtual reference services platform and train staff in other departments such as access services, technical services, and library systems. As the academic year began, Washington State University kept diligent statistics and communicated often on issues and best practices. In addition to these efforts, they executed a marketing campaign of their new services both in the library and around campus. Results from the 2011-2012 year at Washington State University show an overall increase in reference interactions. While the percentage of virtual reference interactions remains only a small percentage of total reference interactions, it is increasing at a dramatically higher rate than face-to-face interactions are. The conclusions of the Washington State University Virtual Reference Services study is that a strategy must be conceived of in advance that takes into account training, researching the appropriate platform, communication, staffing, marketing, and thorough statistics to evaluate progress and regular reassessment of strategy. Finally, the roaming reference model attempts to use the integration of technology into the physical reference service in order to improve the overall experience. The purpose of roaming reference is for librarians to leave the physical space of the reference desk, or even the library entirely, in order to make themselves more accessible to their academic community at large. Roaming reference encourages librarians to revitalize their position within the academic community by leaving their comfort zone and playing a more active part in the reference experience, rather than passively waiting for patrons to approach them. At the University of Northern British Columbia, they conducted a 2-semester experiment of 2 different roaming reference strategies that attempted to combine the personal touch of the reference experience with the immediacy of technology. As part of the first strategy, in fall 2010, librarians with iPads roamed for 90 minutes at a time inside and outside the library, making themselves visible and accessible to students for reference services. While roaming, the librarian had 3 duties: answer in-person questions of any user that approached them, respond to chat reference on their iPads, and even visit a user that contacted them over chat reference if they were in the library or on campus and requested the presence of a librarian. The first semester, University of Northern British Columbia found that roaming reference accounted for 9% of the reference interactions that semester. This was deemed a success, considering it was an entirely new model for reference. The following semester concluded less successfully when the University of Northern British Columbia attempted to streamline reference staffing by combining the reference desk with roaming reference. In this iteration, the reference desk would be left unmanned while the librarian roamed, and if it were approached by a patron, they would be prompted to chat with the roaming librarian, who would answer the question on their iPad or return to the reference desk to assist the patron. This iteration required multiple apps for the roaming librarian to observe at once, and often created glitches that hindered effective communication between patrons and librarians. University of Northern British Columbia found that in the second iteration of the roaming reference librarian, much less roaming questions were documented because the librarian's time was split between the desk and roaming. Their conclusion was that while roaming reference can revitalize the reference experience, it cannot replace the traditional reference desk and what must remain an additional reference service offered. Despite technological innovations and attempts to streamline service that these three reference service models propose, the user-librarian relationship remains at the core of reference service. Each model attempts to efficiently bring the expertise of librarians to the changing needs of users. As users become more confident on digital platforms, librarians too must learn to communicate effectively and reliably on those platforms. Additionally, as libraries increasingly face budget and staffing cuts, reference management must learn how to reorganize and revitalize the reference experience. The reference desk has become tiered, virtual, and roaming, but its original purpose remains the same.